Ethan Harper had always been the quiet observer in every room he entered. He wasn't shy in the traditional sense, but he preferred to measure people first, to understand them before committing to the kind of familiarity that most considered friendship. His 23 years had been punctuated by routine, early morning jogs, late-night online conversations, and weekends spent in the muted company of his thoughts. He liked it that way, predictable yet safe. But tonight, as he lounged on his apartment balcony watching the city lights blur under the faint drizzle, there was an itch of anticipation he couldn't quite name. The invitation had come unexpectedly. His maternal uncle, Ryan Harper, had asked him to drop by a small family gathering. Nothing fancy, just a few neighbors and close friends. Ethan almost declined, citing an early morning the next day, but something in Ryan's tone made him pause, a warmth, an insistence that made saying no impossible. He had always admired his uncle for that balance, firm yet encouraging, cautious yet willing to push boundaries when it mattered. When he arrived at Ryan's townhouse, laughter spilled from the living room, warm and inviting. Ethan's eyes immediately caught a new face among the familiar ones. Caleb Morgan stood near the fireplace, his posture casual but commanding, an effortless charm radiating in the way he tilted his head as he listened to someone speak. Ethan felt a jolt of awareness, an uncomfortable but electric recognition that this person, this friend of his uncle's, was somehow different from everyone else. Caleb noticed Ethan almost immediately, offering a brief, polite smile that lingered just a fraction too long for it to feel ordinary. There was a spark of something unspoken in his gaze, subtle yet undeniable. It made Ethan acutely aware of the rest of the room fading into a blur, his focus narrowing to this one presence. He felt a strange mix of curiosity and hesitation, an internal tug-of-war he couldn't quite rationalize. Ryan, ever perceptive, guided Ethan toward Caleb. "Ethan, this is Caleb. Caleb, meet my nephew, Ethan." The handshake was firm, measured, and lingered just long enough to make Ethan aware of the warmth of Caleb's hand, the understated confidence in the grip. Caleb's voice, when he spoke, was smooth, friendly, and slightly teasing, as if he already knew something private that Ethan had yet to discover about himself. The conversation started lightly, weather, recent neighborhood events, Ryan's usual anecdotes, but there was an undercurrent, subtle and hypnotic. Caleb asked questions that seemed casual but struck deeper than their surface. He noticed Ethan's choice of words, the slight hesitation before he answered, and responded in kind, weaving humor and curiosity in a way that made Ethan feel both seen and slightly vulnerable. It was unsettling in the best possible way. By the time dessert arrived, Ethan found himself sitting closer to Caleb than the situation technically required. He laughed more freely than he had expected, and each glance exchanged seemed to carry more weight than the words spoken. There was no overt flirtation, nothing inappropriate for a family gathering, yet the energy between them hummed with a tension Ethan hadn't anticipated. He caught himself wondering, briefly, almost shamefully, what it would feel like to have this person as his own friend, beyond the confines of familial connection. Caleb excused himself for a moment, and Ethan watched as he moved through the room, effortless and poised, interacting with others in a way that drew them in yet never overwhelmed. There was a quiet magnetism to him, a sense that he lived comfortably on the boundary between charm and enigma. Ethan's mind replayed the first handshake, the subtle nuances of tone, the ease with which Caleb seemed to read him. He realized that he wanted to know Caleb in a way that went beyond casual acquaintance, an admission that both thrilled and terrified him. After the gathering began to wind down, Ryan clapped Ethan lightly on the shoulder. "Don't be shy, kid. Caleb's heading to a coffee shop nearby tomorrow afternoon. Why don't you drop by? You two might get along." The suggestion was casual, almost offhand, but Ethan felt a pulse of excitement he hadn't expected. He nodded, trying to mask the flutter in his chest, and mumbled something noncommittal. Inside, however, a plan was already forming. Back in his apartment, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Caleb. He replayed the moments of conversation, the way Caleb had laughed at his jokes, the intensity behind certain glances. His fingers itched for a phone, for a message to bridge the gap between fleeting acquaintance and potential friendship. And so, he sent a brief, cautious text, a simple, friendly greeting that hinted at curiosity without revealing too much. Caleb responded almost instantly. "Hey, Ethan. Great meeting you tonight. Coffee sounds good, how about tomorrow afternoon?" The efficiency of the reply, combined with the subtle warmth behind it, made Ethan grin despite himself. He typed back a time, paused, deleted, and retyped. He felt a thrill, a pulse of anticipation that made him hyper-aware of the empty apartment around him, the muted hum of the city, and the soft glow of streetlights through the window. Lying on his bed later, Ethan reflected on the evening. There was something about Caleb that made the world feel simultaneously larger and smaller, larger in the possibilities of connection, smaller in the way everything else seemed to fade into the background when he thought of him. It was unnerving and exhilarating, the kind of feeling that came rarely and demanded attention. By the time he drifted off to sleep, Ethan had made an unspoken decision. He would pursue this friendship, carefully, cautiously, but pursue it nonetheless. The spark was there, undeniable, and he couldn't ignore it without betraying a part of himself that had been dormant for far too long. What this path would bring, clarity, chaos, or something in between, he could not yet know. But one thing was certain, his life had just shifted in a way that promised to change everything, and somewhere in the city, Caleb Morgan probably didn't know how much influence he had already begun to wield over Ethan Harper's thoughts, or how the simple act of a smile and a conversation could set the stage for a story neither of them had yet imagined. The days after Ethan's discharge blurred into a gray rhythm of routine and restlessness. His body felt better, but his mind kept circling back to the hospital, the quiet room, the doctor's calm voice, and the folded note tucked in his wallet like a secret. Every time he opened it, he read the words again, "Rest isn't weakness. It's the beginning of strength." It wasn't just advice, it felt like someone had seen right through him. Michael, on the other hand, had grown even more distant. He spoke in short sentences, as though conversation was a chore. When Ethan tried to talk about the hospital, Michael only nodded absently, eyes fixed on his phone. "I'm glad you're fine," he said once. "Try not to overthink it." The words landed like cold rain. 3 weeks later, Ethan found himself outside the clinic again. He told himself it was just a follow-up, just being responsible, but even he didn't believe that. His palms were slightly damp as he waited at the reception desk. When Dr. Liam Hart finally appeared, Ethan felt his chest ease, as if his body had been holding its breath. "Mr. Cole," Liam greeted, that same calm smile returning. "Back already?" "Just wanted to make sure I'm really okay," Ethan said. "You told me to rest, and I actually listened, for once." Liam chuckled softly. "I should add that to my record. A patient who follows instructions." The examination was brief, ordinary. But afterward, Liam didn't immediately leave. Instead, he leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "You look lighter," he said. "Did something change?" Ethan hesitated. "Not really. Maybe I just stopped pretending everything's fine." "That's a start," Liam said quietly. "Pretending is more exhausting than any job." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a small recognition, a flicker of shared weariness. As Ethan got up to leave, Liam said, "If you ever want to talk, not as a patient, but as a person, I'm here." Ethan nodded, managing a small smile. "I might take you up on that." And he did. Over the following weeks, Ethan began dropping by the clinic during lunch breaks or after work. Sometimes he brought coffee, sometimes he just sat in the waiting area until Liam's shift ended. Their conversations were never forced. They talked about art, about what music helped them think, about how strange it was to grow up learning to please everyone but yourself. Liam spoke sparingly about his life, enough to reveal traces of solitude. His parents lived in another state, and he admitted he'd been through a breakup last year. "People assume doctors have their lives together," he said once, glancing out the window. "But we just hide it better." Ethan smiled sadly. "Guess we both hide well." It wasn't romance yet, not exactly. It was something quieter, two people leaning toward warmth after too much cold. There were moments, though, when the silence between them felt fragile, dangerous. A brush of fingers when passing a coffee cup. A shared laugh that lingered too long. At home, things were unraveling. Michael came in late, his explanations vague. Ethan didn't ask anymore, he just noted the unfamiliar scent on Michael's shirt and the way he turned his phone face down. One night, while clearing the table, Ethan noticed a message flash across the screen, "Miss you already." The name wasn't saved, his first reaction wasn't anger but clarity. Whatever they'd built was already gone. That weekend, Ethan went for a walk to clear his head. Rain began to fall, light at first, then heavier. He was near the clinic when headlights flashed across the street. A car slowed beside him. Liam's voice called out through the open window, "You'll catch a cold walking like that. Get in." Ethan hesitated only a second before sliding into the passenger seat. The air inside smelled faintly of rain and mint. Neither spoke as the wipers beat a steady rhythm. "You okay?" Liam asked at last. Ethan exhaled. "Not really. But I'm trying." They stopped at a red light. The glow from the street lamps flickered across Liam's face, calm, careful, human. "You don't have to be okay all the time," he said. "You just have to be honest." Something in Ethan broke then. The words spilled out, how Michael had grown distant, how he felt invisible, how the loneliness had settled in like a second skin. Liam didn't interrupt. He just listened, the way few people ever did. When Ethan finished, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It felt like being held without touch. Liam turned toward him, his voice soft. "Ethan, you deserve to be with someone who doesn't make you feel small." The traffic light changed, but neither of them moved. Ethan looked out the window, rain streaking the glass like blurred tears. "You shouldn't say things like that," he whispered. "Why not?" "Because it feels like something I could start believing." Liam's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Then maybe you should." For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them thickened, humming with everything neither dared to say. Finally, Liam drove on. He stopped in front of Ethan's building, the rain still falling in steady sheets. Ethan didn't reach for the door handle right away. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For listening. For seeing me." Liam looked at him, eyes unreadable. "Sometimes that's all someone needs, to be seen." Ethan's throat tightened. "It's strange. I barely know you, but it feels familiar," Liam finished, his voice barely above a whisper. They sat there, caught in that fragile stillness, until the rain softened into a drizzle. Ethan finally stepped out, the night air cool against his face. He turned back, meeting Liam's gaze through the half-open window. "Good night, Dr. Hart." "Good night, Ethan." As the car pulled away, the reflection of taillights shimmered on the wet pavement like fading embers. Ethan stood there until they disappeared around the corner. Upstairs, the apartment was dark. Michael was home but asleep on the couch, his phone resting loosely in his hand. Ethan set his keys down quietly and watched him for a moment. There was no anger left, only distance. That he went to his room, sat on the edge of the bed, and took out the note from his wallet once again. "Rest isn't weakness." The words had changed meaning now. Maybe rest wasn't just about the body, it was about letting go of what no longer nurtured you. Outside, thunder rumbled softly, rolling through the city like a quiet warning. Ethan lay back, eyes open in the dim light, aware of the new truth forming within him. It wasn't love yet, not with Liam, not with anyone, but it was something close to hope, and that was more than he'd had in a long time. That he didn't know what came next. But for the first time, he wanted to find out. Ethan stared at his phone long after Logan's message had arrived, the glow illuminating his restless expression in the dim light of his apartment. "See you tomorrow. There's something I want to show you." The words seemed innocent, yet they carried a weight that made Ethan's chest tighten. He knew this meeting was inevitable, that whatever Logan wanted to show him would push boundaries he had been trying to maintain. And yet, a part of him, a part he couldn't silence, was eager, almost desperate, to see what lay beyond that line. The following afternoon, they met at a quiet park on the edge of town. Autumn leaves drifted lazily around them, and the crisp air carried the faint scent of wood smoke from distant chimneys. Logan was already there, leaning against a tree, his hands stuffed casually into his jacket pockets, a small, knowing smile playing at his lips. The sight of him sent a shiver down Ethan's spine, an electric anticipation that made him stumble over his words. "Hey," Logan greeted, voice low, warm, casual. "Thanks for coming." "Of course," Ethan replied, forcing calm into his tone, though his heart thumped so loudly he was sure Logan could hear it. They walked along a winding path, conversation light at first, laughter punctuating the chill air. Yet beneath it all, the tension between them was palpable. Every glance, every brush of a sleeve against the other's arm carried unspoken meaning. Logan's eyes lingered longer than usual, and Ethan caught himself holding that gaze, caught in a magnetism that was impossible to ignore. Eventually, they reached a secluded bench near a small pond. Logan gestured for Ethan to sit. "I wanted to show you something," he said, producing a small notebook from his jacket. "I write sometimes. Thoughts, stories, reflections. You might like it." Ethan hesitated, curiosity battling with apprehension. He took the notebook, and as he flipped through pages, he realized the entries were more personal than he had expected, reflections on friendship, longing, and the subtle ache of unspoken attraction. Each word seemed to speak directly to Ethan, bypassing his defenses and planting seeds of desire and confusion. "Didn't know you felt any of this," Ethan murmured, his fingers tracing the words, his pulse accelerating. Logan leaned closer, just slightly, enough for the warmth of his shoulder to brush Ethan's. "I didn't mean for you to read it all at once," he said softly, voice barely above the rustle of leaves. "But I wanted you to understand me, in a way no one else does." Ethan felt a wave of conflicting emotions. There was guilt, for the intensity of the attraction he felt for someone who was supposed to be untouchable in his mind. There was fear, for the potential consequences if Aiden ever discovered the depth of their connection. And there was undeniable, heady excitement, a thrill that coursed through him like electricity. They sat in silence for a moment, the air thick with anticipation. Logan's gaze held Ethan's, steady and unrelenting, and in that unspoken space, the boundaries they had been skirting all week began to blur. The brush of a hand against a notebook, the accidental touch of knees under the bench, each action became a spark, igniting emotions neither could fully contain. Finally, Logan broke the quiet. "Ethan. I know this is complicated. And I know you care about Aiden, but," his words trailed, leaving the thought unfinished yet heavy with implication. Ethan swallowed hard, the weight of desire and guilt pressing on him from all sides. I don't know what to say," he admitted, voice tight. "This feels wrong." But at the same time, his sentence dissolved into a whisper, because there was no denying the pull he felt, the longing that had taken root in his chest. Logan smiled gently, understanding, patient. "You don't have to decide anything now," he said. "I just want you to know that this, whatever this is, exists. And it's real." That honesty, the vulnerability Logan allowed himself to show, only deepened Ethan's internal conflict. He felt drawn to Logan not just physically, but emotionally, in ways that scared and thrilled him all at once. Every word, every glance, every subtle gesture made him more aware of the delicate line they were walking, and how intoxicating it was to teeter on the edge. Over the next few days, the intensity of their interactions escalated. Messages became more frequent, filled with inside jokes, shared reflections, and hints of emotional intimacy that went beyond mere friendship. Ethan found himself laughing more freely, thinking more deeply, and noticing facets of himself he hadn't acknowledged before. Logan had a way of drawing out his vulnerabilities without ever seeming intrusive, and Ethan realized he was enjoying it, terrified as he was of the consequences. Yet, with every thrill came guilt. Aiden's trust weighed heavily on him, a constant reminder of the boundaries he was approaching. Ethan struggled with the duality of his feelings, the exhilaration of emotional closeness with Logan, and the heavy pang of betrayal that accompanied it. Each time he interacted with Logan, he was walking a tightrope, balancing desire against conscience, curiosity against loyalty. One evening, Ethan found himself pacing his apartment, replaying recent moments over and over. The memory of Logan's smile, the warmth of his casual touch, and the intensity of his gaze made it impossible to think clearly. He realized he was at a crossroads. The choice wasn't whether he was attracted to Logan, that was undeniable, but whether he would let himself fully cross into a territory that might change everything. By the end of the week, Logan invited Ethan to a late-night walk along the river. The city lights shimmered on the water, casting long reflections that danced and twisted with the gentle current. Logan spoke quietly, sincerely, about dreams, regrets, and the fleeting nature of certain opportunities. Ethan listened, mesmerized, feeling the pull of emotions he hadn't allowed himself to acknowledge, and then, as the night deepened, Logan stopped and turned to him. "Ethan, whatever happens between us, I want it to be something we both understand. Nothing forced. Nothing rushed. But I want you to know that I'm here. And I'm not leaving." Ethan felt a surge of warmth, confusion, and longing collide. He realized, with a mixture of fear and exhilaration, that he had already crossed the line emotionally, if not physically. There was no undoing the connection that had formed, no pretending it didn't exist. The question now was how he would navigate it, and whether he could survive the storm of desire, guilt, and the uncertain consequences that lay ahead. As he walked home alone that night, the city silent around him, Ethan understood something crucial: his life had changed. The line had been approached, tested, and subtly crossed, leaving him suspended between the safety of routine and the intoxicating pull of forbidden desire. And deep down, he knew this story, his story, was only just beginning.